The National Investor's motto is, you can get information anywhere, but here you get knowledge. And for well over 40 years now, Chris Temple has imparted that knowledge, an unparalleled, understandable, and useful take on the big picture of the markets and of our world. Without further ado, here is Chris with today's topic.
Welcome back once again. Today I'm going to be joined by my old friend Des O'Kell. Des is a director and the president of Enterprise Group, which, as you see here, is listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange under the symbol E, simple enough. And here in the US on the OTCQB, you'll find it under ETOLF. Before I get into anything today, the usual forward-looking statement slide here from Enterprise, Des and or myself, that we're going to talk about both an enterprise update as well as the broader landscape of energy and politics in Canada and things of that nature. Nonetheless, we'll likely be making some forward-looking statements, so be mindful of that. With the notes to this particular discussion with Des, I have links to our last couple of discussions where we got into more detail, especially in enterprise. The company is a multifaceted energy services company. As you see here, they had a monster run. They were one of the survivors of the long bear market in Canada's oil patch, had a huge run. As it was nearing its peak, I told our folks to lighten up a bit, but after the stock from its peak being cut pretty much in half, I think it's as compelling now as it was back when it was 18 or 20 cents, given what we believe is the future of the company and the companies that, more importantly, enterprise services in Western Canada, as we see if among the other things that still aren't good in Canada, business-wise and whatnot, it seems as though even the government of Prime Minister Carney is embracing natural gas and a lot of the infrastructure that goes with that. So I think Enterprise has got a great future. And if you didn't get a chance to get into round one, when the stock was down at sub 20-cent level a few years back, this is just about as good in my view, given how much more improved the landscape is. So Des and I are going to go into an update on Enterprise itself, some of its recent news, its third quarter numbers, and the things behind that. But I'm also going to ask him again about how he sees things shaping up. You know, Prime Minister Carney dodged a bit of a bullet recently. He was able to get his budget through, and among other things, that is going to give some, arguably some help to Canada's oil patch, but in select areas. Similarly to what we've seen happen in the U.S., he has set up kind of a commission in which he's a member to give fast track approvals to certain projects that he believes are in Canada's national interest. One of them recently was one of the looming development stage projects to export even more natural gas from Canada now that LNG Canada, which is the big one, is already up and running and shipping gas. And here is my old friend Des O'Kell back with us. Des, good to see you again.
Nice to see you, Chris. Always good to get a good chat in with you.
Oh yeah, well, some good chats we've had for a lot of years, and it's industry stuff, it's energy, it's politics, it's whatever. A little bit of golf talk before we hit the record button today as well. And you do. I should point out to people that want to keep up with you. You do your own podcast. From time to time. I think you just dusted it off after a little bit of a hiatus, but it's called the Pragmatics. Tell us about how that came about.
Well, you know, a childhood friend of mine, Stu Fowler, he's an executive in a different industry than I'm in. He's although he's coming at the later end of it, he's been in the pharma world at CEO level and all the way up. Stu is, like I said, great friend of mine. We went to the first grade together and went through school. Stayed very very close, and best man at my wedding, my first wedding.
Nice.
Anyway, no, we stayed close, and we felt that a couple 3 years ago, we felt that there was a tremendous amount of things that were happening that affect citizens, working people, that are happening politically. items that really affect day to day, whether it's financial or societal or what have you. And we felt that, kind of moving around, a lot of people didn't have any understanding of some of the things that were developing politically or societally and what have you. So we felt that, maybe coming from the energy sector and him coming from the health and pharma side, we felt that there was an opportunity with the network of people that we know from both those different industries, that we could bring on guests that would be subject matter experts. We'd be able to touch on some of these issues. Obviously, Stu and I have our own opinions and so forth, but bringing on those guests from these different areas that would be offer quality dialogue on many of these issues. So that's why we call it the pragmatics, because Stu and I feel that we're very pragmatic. We look at data. We're willing for our opinions to be shaped by new information, and we want it to be based on the realities of the
Sure.
way it is. So that's how it was formed. I was in the vehicle heading around our Western Canadian operations, and I got him on the phone, and we talked about should we put a little few episodes together based on what I just described, and that's how it started. So I think we've been doing it for maybe 2.5 years, and we've got this. When you bring on a guest, obviously that guest wants to promote it and so
Sure.
forth. So a new crowd gets introduced to the pragmatics and so forth. And so here we are. We got a modest little following, and we talk about very important subjects to all of us walking the streets, right? So
Well, nice.
we find value in it.
I've got to attach to the show notes here for this particular discussion with you and I've got a link to your latest podcast, and I found it really interesting. There's a lot of stuff going on in Canada. Is Prime Minister Carney really that serious about building up energy and mining infrastructure? Is it all talk? Is all of the green stuff still going to be in the way? And a lot of other stuff. An important land issue in BC in the recent past that people
Yeah.
have talked about. And so I'll leave that for people to listen to separately later on, because I want to do a couple of things in the minutes that we have to catch up today. First of all, on Enterprise Group specifically, I want to go back to late summer. And those who will follow the story or look again at the notes that I have along with this video understand what Evolution Power Projects is all about. And, when you come up with something that dramatic, it's part of the reason why you guys have been doing really good business-wise. And now you're able to provide a lot cheaper natural gas, get a lot of remote projects weaned off of diesel. But there was one hole in the food chain, so to speak, for that, and that is, where do you get the natural gas from? If your client out in the bush someplace or out in the hinterlands doesn't have a natural gas well already where they could get their own energy, and you solved that problem this summer. So tell us
Yeah,
about
we
that.
did. Well, if you look at like you described, we're obviously servicing many producers in the energy sector. So the majority of our clients do have access to their own gas production on site or nearby. So the logistics to move their field gas or well gas, solution gas to our units, those logistics require a little bit of managing, but it can very easily happen. The areas where the client does not have access to natural gas supply at the remote area, there is a CNG, which is compressed natural gas. There's an economy going on in CNG, and there's a few players. It's not a wildly populated landscape at the moment. There's a few players, but we've signed an arrangement to cover this, like you said, this hole. We've done a deal with Plum Gas Solutions. They're an American-based company with a Canadian operation, and this allows, and they've been operating up here in Canada for a while as well, and they have their own set of clients and like we do. But together, where we can offer the client a much better value as a package, we're working together. So it's a very, very nice arrangement. They're high quality people over at Plum Gas Solutions. I met the owner who's from Michigan. He was up here for an energy conference that was happening in Calgary, and we had the chance to sit down with their whole team. Extremely high level competence on this team. They're actually they were over in the Middle East, I believe, here in the last few weeks, developing more of a global presence as well. So strong team, good. And the nice thing, one of their strong locations where their management is here in Canada is literally a couple of blocks away from one of our branches. So there's some proximity advantages as well, having the two teams close together. And no, it's been a great start. We've been working on common clients as a partnership here for the last few months. It's a nice start to a very what I think is going to be a fruitful partnership.
Well, neat. I'm glad to hear that, and it only makes your offerings better in conjunction with them, because again, now you've got all the bases covered for providing all of this
Absolutely.
remote energy for folks. That's great. I also want to talk real quick. It was about a week ago as we're recording this, that you came out with your Q3 financials. A nice jump up from Q3 of 2024, although that was after a little bit of a slow period earlier on this year. But you've got some momentum back financially. I think that's going to drive a re-rating. I discussed your great share price performance of the last few years before you came on. The market has corrected. You've given back about half of it
Hmm.
in the recent past, and it's a good area, I think, for people to load up on again. What do you see going forward? Well, first of all, Des, tell us about what were the main factors that led to your Q3 revenue jump and what you see for the balance of the year. Some of which, of course, obviously you're already experiencing, even if you haven't reported it.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest about how the setup of that happened. I mean, Q2 for us energy services players here in Canada, Q2, the previous quarter, is what we call the breakup quarter.
Right.
So the breakup quarter is naturally less active than the other three quarters in the year, and that's because we go from a terrain that is frozen and very competent to the thaw, which really is confined to the April, May months. And in these remote areas, when you go from a very competent, hard, frozen ground where moving heavy equipment around is very easy, and of course that's why the frozen months for the energy services world are the more active quarters
Yeah.
because there is no ground you can't access because if it's wet out there in the summer, it's frozen hard, and you can move that heavy equipment around, get your
You're
programs
not you're not
completed,
going
and
to
so forth.
bury that heavy equipment up to the axles or worse.
Or worse, exactly, or lose it completely. But so that thaw period of it confined to April and May. Well, it was the first two
Yeah.
months of Q3, so they're a slower quarter, and not everybody really understands that, but they
Yeah.
should because there isn't a Q2 in energy services business up here in Canada that
Right.
has their best quarter in Q2. It just
Right.
can't happen almost. So we obviously we had a traditional breakup quarter. It was soppy and wet, and it took a little while to dry up, and it was very typical. Unlike the Q2 the previous year, where there was lots of activity that ran from Q1 into April. So April was so strong it really lifted that Q2 for us and many other peers as well. But having said that, going from that Q2 to Q3, obviously we're going to really have better revenues and so forth. But comparative to the Q3 previous year, yes, it's a markedly better quarter. But that's also coming off the 2024. The front half of the year was turbocharged for us, and we had a very, very strong Q1, like record. And like I said, that Q2 had a front-loaded April from that active Q1. So we had a first half of the year that was quite turbocharged. The back half of the year, because of a number of situations, The majority of it having to do with the delays at LNG Canada. They were very much delayed in getting their facility finished and ready for first cargo. Well, first cargo ended up being last week of June this year. So and then they've had with a brand new liquefaction facility, they had their nits to work out and so forth. And that initial train one that opened first cargo late in June. They just announced train two, which this facility has two trains, one and two, and train two starts producing cargo here this month. It could be happening by now. It was announced a couple 3 weeks ago. So having LNG Canada literally about a year plus in delay, it backed off that last half of 2024. So when you compare our Q3 this year to last year's Q3, it's a hell of an improvement, but it wasn't a massive bar to jump over, to be honest with you. So, telling it like it is.
Okay, well, that's what you always do, and that's why we get along so well, is that we're both pragmatics and we both like to call things as we see them, etc. So what do you see for going into the balance of the year? And do you have much ongoing work with LNG Canada? You did a lot of the setup and pipe
Well,
preparation and all that kind of thing.
yeah, we were involved with our heating division that has
Right.
specialized, very, very large BTU delivery of up to 15,000 cubic feet of airflow and 3,000 or 3 million BTU of heat. Those were designed for heating pipelines at the construction phase. So we were involved in the gas link line that was built for LNG Canada. But that construction of that pipeline was completed about 2 years ago. It was
Right.
completed well in advance of the facility being ready to liquefy. So we were involved with that, but the lead up, kind of stutter stepped with the delay of actually liquefying production through that pipeline and getting first cargo out. That was delayed at least a year. So, and it sort of made the producers here that were part of the feedstock of that LNG Canada, it made them stutter step a little bit, and that because many of our clients are contractually involved in that feedstock, they were stop, start, wait,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So it affected that Q3 and Q4 last year.
Right.
Now, where we stand today going forward, it's a remarkable looking landscape for the natural gas producers. Obviously, we're in this landscape of serious demand worldwide for natural gas. It's increasing and increasing. Then you pile on things like the appetite for AI data centers and the appetite for natural gas. I mean, if you listen to a few, the experts out there that are really, focused on the nitty gritty metrics of global nat gas and what have you. And I listen to a guy up here quite a bit, Eric Nuttall. He's Canada's largest energy fund manager. Very, very good commentator on the industry. And also, I don't know, have you down your way in the US, have you heard of Doomberg? I'm sure you have.
Sure.
Have you heard Doomberg? It's a team, focuses on a number of things, but generally energy.
Yeah.
And the theory coming out of it's not really a theory, I guess, but it's the natural extension of all of this AI data center. There's only one way to generate that power, and that is the majority of it coming out of natural gas resources in North America. Comparatively speaking, it's very inexpensive.
Yep.
There's loads of it, and that AI buildup is going to sop up a tremendous amount of natural gas here in Europe and other parts of the world. So
Yeah.
we look at the natural gas landscape worldwide and North America as one that we're at the start or we're in the first inning or two of a tremendous bull market in natural gas.
Oh, I
So
couldn't agree more. I was
okay.
I was a couple weeks ago at the New Orleans Investment Conference, and of course, it's traditionally a gold-centric conference, but they cover other commodities, fossil fuels to some extent, but certainly not a lot of companies that are there. It's more the gold companies, some of the base metals and stuff like that. And of course, where commodities are concerned in the recent past, some of the hot investment themes have been around a lot of these critical minerals that are one-off stories, and largely because China has had an embargo on
Hmm.
them. They won't export them to much of the rest of the world, not just the U.S., but to the EU and elsewhere. So I was doing an interview with one of the media people that was there, and he asked me what going forward, because I had our people take a lot of profits in the recent past after big runs on everything from precious metals to rare earths, antimony, tungsten, some of those kind of things. Still like them all long term, but I think we're in a no man's land now for reasons that's a subject for another day. But he asked me, going forward from right now where we're at, what do you think is one of the more compelling critical mineral stories out there? I said, well, I'll throw you a curve because this isn't discussed in most contexts these days where critical minerals are concerned, but I like oil and natural gas.
Hmm.
They're a hell of a lot more critical than people understand, and we can't do without them. We need more of them. And
Exactly.
you probably follow some of the stuff going on in the U.S. as well. I mean, Chris Wright, our energy secretary, has made extremely clear that there's only two ways. Solar and wind and all these other things, geothermal, they're nice and small, isolated, specialized contexts. But if you want 24/7 grid power that's reliable, there's two ways you're going to get there: natural gas and nuclear power. And
Absolutely.
natural gas is going to do the heavy lifting. So, and it's especially timely for us to have this update now on the Canadian landscape. Prime Minister Carney has settled in somewhat. He got his budget through, and there's been some reports I read about what that budget contains for investment, everything from extending hydropower from BC into the Yukon, where there's a lot of development stage metals projects of various kinds up and coming. What does it do for Canada's energy industry specifically? There's been talk on and off that in his on and off dickering with President Trump down here, the subject has come up that they'll resurrect the Keystone Pipeline if Trump relents on some of the tariffs and does some other things. How do you see this starting to move forward from this point now where the prime minister got his budget passed, so you're not going to have to worry about an election up there again, at least anytime soon? How do you see things shaking out?
Well, yeah, I mean, having the budget pass it takes away the non-confidence vote, so we're on. We've the calendar is full now,
Yeah,
so to speak. But I guess where we stand, looking at certainly our sector and how is that positioned and moving forward. There's a tremendous amount for me and people that think like me. There's plenty of reasons to be disappointed with this particular prime minister. But having said that, one thing that is crystal clear is, you got to remember he's the architect and one of the co-founders of GFANZ, the Glasgow Financial Alliance for net zero. So this guy comes from this world, right? So, but having said that, there's no doubt about it. They've been crystal clear that they have an appetite for natural gas.
yeah,
When it comes to oil bitumen pipelines and what have you, they seem to be very, very tight-lipped and very close to their chest. Spinning around, not using certain, vocabulary and what have you, and you can see how they're behaving. But
right,
there is an appetite for natural gas, and I think purely is because it's a much more responsible combustion of all the hydrocarbons. It's the cleanest combustion you'll get out of all these hydrocarbons. So there's an appetite for it. There's already been the other LNG projects on the west coast of Canada have gotten up to and further past approval. I mean, even the federal government was handing out hundreds of millions of dollars to the two other, Cedar, which is ownership led by the Haisla First Nations,
yep,
and then this new one. and we'll talk about this a bit, but they produced a major projects office to sort of fast track certain projects that are in national interest. And the other First Nations LNG project called Casila Sims, again, led by a different First Nations group on the coast. Their LNG project got fast tracked in this last 2 weeks. You can see the appetite for the natural gas side of the hydrocarbon world is a little more. There's more stomach. There's more mind for it than bitumen style pipelines, which
They're not going to
seem
build.
to.
They're not going to build new pipelines from the tar sands or try and do a whole hell of a lot for them up there. But natural gas is a different
Yeah,
story.
certainly to the West Coast.
Yeah,
Because we have the BC provincial government there that has a history of trying to block oil pipelines to the coast.
yeah.
I mentioned one thing Carney did, the prime minister, is instead of relaxing some of these very, very exhausting and discouraging uh, legislation that was brought in the Trudeau era that was designed like the Environmental Assessment Act. So
Right.
Trudeau back put out C-69 bill, and basically it created it retooled the Environmental Assessment Act to a point where it was designed to exhaust the projects that are going through it, so people would just walk away.
Mhm.
I think I mentioned it on your podcast or your interview one time before. Warren Buffett had $4 billion into
Yeah.
the Saguenay LNG project on the Quebec coast on the
Right.
eastern side of Canada. And that was a project that was not grandfathered through the Assessment Act from previous, like LNG Canada was. This one was caught in that new C-69 bill, and it was going in, all the documentation and reporting goes in, and they just keep feeding it back out with deficiencies and add this, and it just goes like this for years. So Buffett pulled his $4 billion, and he was on an interview, I think, on CNBC, and it wasn't about specifically this, but the interviewer asked Warren Buffett, I see you pulled $4 billion out of Canada there on this LNG project. What happened there? And of course, he paused, and pretty diplomatic guy, and he just
Right.
said, well, the environmental regulatory regime in Canada is like a maze with no
No
cheese.
cheese. Yeah. That's right.
So, I guess so. The pressure was on Carney coming in after Trudeau is to retool C-69 so projects can actually get through in reasonable time and not be so onerous and exhausting. Other things like we have a tanker ban on the coast of BC, so no Canadian oil can be moved by tanker off the Canadian coast. Meanwhile, your American Alaskan tankers are moving oil from Alaska to the west coast of the U.S. daily. There's
Yeah.
270 tankers go back and forth through those same waters. But Canada's got a Canadian tanker ban on that. So the energy industry is asking for these to be repealed or retooled so that investment can come into Canada and not have to worry about this, what I just described about Warren Buffett.
Right.
Instead of relaxing those things or repealing all of that legislation, he's brought in Bill C-5, which is basically a panel, which is him and a few of his cabinet ministers, will decide what projects have national interest and that are nation builders, and they will fast track them. Okay. So, instead of just fixing your regulatory process to make the rules and the goalposts all known, so people know the rules, they can come in here and make their investments, build their plans and so forth, and know that they'll go in and be approved in a timely manner. Instead of fixing all that, we're going through this
Well,
panel
the question is to determine,
review.
and I'm going to be a little facetious here for a minute, Des. So to determine which of these things get fast tracked. You got to figure out what Brookfield is invested in, what John Paulson in the U.S. is invested in. I ran into a old friend of mine. He lives on the other side of the country from you in Nova Scotia. He was apoplectic over the recent Brookfield, Cameco, Westinghouse, U.S.
Yeah.
$80 billion long-term huge deal for SMRs, uranium, the whole deal. And I mean, when the average person might have been cheering, he was beside himself saying, Carney's a bigger crook than I thought because of all the stuff he should be doing. He'll do what feathers Brookfield's nest, you know.
Yeah. Oh,
Uh,
it's amazing.
or some of his
Uh,
friends. I mean, the same thing is going on down here. But I do find it interesting, not to get on too much of a tangent myself now, Des, but I do find it interesting that the prime minister is taking this position, which, as a practical matter, I guess is an improvement over what came before, because at least some stuff is going to get done. There's going to be at least some investment, whether nepotism is involved or whether it's the stuff that actually should get funded is a debate like we're having down here in the U.S. Um, but, for all of the decades that both of our countries have been behind the eight ball, now we're all hostage in one way or the other to China and other foreign players. We're hostage to all of the institutions that have arisen in both the U.S. and Canada to keep resource development from happening. Now we know it's reversing. It's not happening fast enough. So the question is, what do we do from this point? And down here, a big debate right now is over whether, who made the federal government in the U.S. a private equity fund? Is it even the place
yeah.
of the government to be funding some of these things? The other side of that discussion is, look, we're so far behind. However it gets done, we need even more than what Trump is doing, and you need even more up there than what the prime minister is doing so far.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The U.S. government getting involved in equity positions in these situations. I mean, it surprised the heck out of me. But
Yeah,
you made your last point is a good one, considering how far back the country or the Western world is positioned. Um, no solution is too ridiculous, I guess.
right.
I mean, as a conservative-minded guy, a fiscally responsible, guy that is responsible for good governance and so forth. When that happened, I was, what's going on here, right? I mean,
Yeah,
this is, in normally thinking, this would be a tremendous overstep.
sure.
And government doesn't need to be playing around in equity positions. I mean, the landscape can get very, very, can be corrupt in a bloody hurry. So I don't know why, but you made a good point. Uh, we are so far behind. The Chinese position on many of these critical minerals and so forth is so locked up. Something has to be done.
Yeah,
Um, and the position that Canada and the U.S. is in, geographically and geologically, something needs to be fast tracked. I
oh
mean,
yeah,
and going back to our business and that landscape that I hope I properly laid out.
yep.
We feel even though I'm not a Carney voter or what have you. I do believe that our nat gas uh, future is very much underpinned at the moment, and it's set for serious growth. We've got 4 LNG projects that are either being built, or fully approved to start.
Right.
Okay, so we've got those 2 First Nations led projects, and then what we haven't talked about is wood fiber. That's a company that they have LNG facilities off the west coast of Australia. This is over in the Squamish area. Their partner is the Squamish First Nation. So lots of First Nation involvement. I like that, obviously, because most people think, well, if there's a First Nations or an Aboriginal group, their immediate thought is they're against all this type of hydrocarbon development. When in fact, they pragmatically come to the conclusion that, well, this economy is going to happen. We need to be involved with it.
That's right.
You know, their ability to move from poverty or low income to being a proper economic player in what's happening around them. Absolutely. Get at the
There's a lot
table,
of
be
good, yeah.
involved.
There's a lot of
You
good
know?
stuff like that, and you and I may have talked about this. I've talked about this in other contexts, but you look at in BC, for example, in the context of mining, the Niska Nation out there. I mean, they've set up a
Mhm.
royalty fund, an investment fund, besides having equity interests in some of the projects in BC.
Yeah.
You know, and it's about time. I mean, that's the way things should be. A lot of
Yeah.
those stories like this in Canada are farther ahead than what we still deal with in the US, although I think that's coming around to the same kind of a mindset. In the US, it's all about casinos. Give them a casino, you know, and shut them up. But in the
Exactly.
West, but in the Western US, there's way more potential than that, and some people are finally starting to wise up to that. Well, let's tie this up at least for present purposes, Des. No question that the natural gas industry specifically, you know, maybe oil production somewhat as well here and there based on fundamentals of different projects and companies, but certainly natural gas with you guys aggressively building out this export market, that ship is sailing to, you know, pun intended,
Hmm.
with all of these cargo ships that'll be leaving on top of the ones that I already have from Kitimat and elsewhere. But I've said before, and you and I have had the discussion before, that when I look at this from a U.S. standpoint and for U.S. investors, even beyond Canadian investors, you know, in relative terms, there's still a lot more juice left in different fields and formations in Canada than a lot of what's already been exhausted in the U.S. In the U.S., a lot of shale plays, for example, that have produced both oil and natural gas, they're peaking at different
Hmm.
speeds. A couple of them have already rolled over pretty notably in production. Overall, production in the U.S. has rolled over, started to a bit, because especially at recent prices, whether President Trump wants drill baby drill or not, he ain't getting it. Rig counts are at a 4 or 5 year low, I think now. And no one's going to go out and develop more oil and even natural gas at current prices. They all know that the prices got to go up, and
Hmm.
that's going to benefit everybody. So, do you see it that way that you're going to start hearing more, or maybe you already are, about involvement on the part of U.S. investors and even companies that are going to want to start getting a piece of Canada's oil patch?
Well, I'm glad you brought this up because it was something that I had on a note to actually bring up with you, and you've introduced this concept here nicely. So, what is happening here? And yes, we are starting to see U.S. interest in Canada. You are absolutely correct. The shale revolution. It's been described by many of the experts saying in the U.S. that shale revolution is, at the top of the eighth inning. I mean, there's still, let's face it, all of the tier one locations, they've all been drilled. 1 to 60 wells are those are premium wells. They've already declined. The next 61 to 120 wells will be much less in production. So it is at the back end of that window. When you take your eyes and bring them up to Canada, and you look at these world-class deposits that we have in the Montney and the Duvernay, and what's happening in the Clearwater and so forth, we have over 1,100 TCF of proven. I mean, we're up in the fourth or fifth largest natural gas deposits in the world, and we're in the top of the third inning. So when the sort of exhausted inventory on the U.S. side is in this phase, the eyes are coming looking at Canada for that longevity of inventory. And many of our Canadian producers, although their valuations have moved, they've moved slow, but they're still very, very low. We've got a 71-cent dollar to the U.S. So the U.S. is naturally it's an the next extension of activity to look at these opportunities in Canada. So, when I mentioned earlier, we're at this sort of uh, you know early phases of a nat gas bull market, or oil and gas bull market. This really supports that. Certainly from our Western Canadian basin here that we're operating in, it is very attractive to the American producers. We've already seen Ovintiv that operates in the U.S. and Canada. They've made two acquisitions, property acquisitions, and they bought New Vista, who's well positioned in the Montney. We've seen Baytex here in Canada that bought Ranger Oil a few years back. They sold Ranger a week or two ago, and they're repatriating that capital back into these plays here in Canada. So we're already starting to see American and Canadian, investment repatriate out of the U.S. and focus it on Canada. We're going to start to see American names in full force coming to Canada. It's right in front of it,
Oh, no
in front of
question.
us. What I'm hearing is, they're up here talking with the capital markets and the analysts, and that's where we are. So I do see a very, very interesting next few years.
Oh, I agree. And you mentioned that Canada's reserves of natural gas are 1,100 TCF. For people that don't know what that means, that's 1.1 quadrillion cubic feet.
Yeah,
Quadrillion is a number we're going to get used to more and more when we talk about global debt. We're running out of trillions inexorably. And
yeah.
I'm expecting to hear President Trump any minute now, instead of claiming all of these multiple trillions of dollars that he has commitments on for the U.S. We're going to go from trillions to bazillions and gazillions and
New
whatever.
descriptors.
Yeah, yeah, we need new descriptors, but
Well,
we
let me
don't.
put it into, I'll put it into perspective. At today's production in Canada, it's like 160 years of longevity, of production
Yeah,
longevity.
yeah. Well, by far and away, there is no more reliable and major demand for anything on the planet by and large, volume wise, than there is for natural gas. It's going to continue to go up. Every chart you look at, and even before we started adding all of this artificial intelligence silliness to what was already, blowing out of projected future demand, just from industrializing parts of the world that aren't already industrialized, just from upgrading other things, from getting rid of a little bit more coal in time to come, the growth in populations, everything. Natural gas was looking great to me long term before all of this other stuff got added to it. And so,
Absolutely.
so to that extent, it doesn't matter because I'm very skeptical on this whole AI thing, and I think it's a lot of flim flam and Ponzi scheming. Company A is going to invest X in company B. Company B says, "Oh, goody, we'll invest in company C," and then it comes back around. I think there's going to be some tears on this whole thing, certainly from a lot of late investors down the road.
Mhm.
Even though
Yeah,
artificial intelligence is here and it's here to stay and it's going to be improved on, a lot of the hype around it lately has just been silly. But thankfully, that doesn't change substantially the bullish picture for energy going forward, either
yeah,
for natural gas or for nuclear, which will only be that much more if this is more real than I skeptically think that it is. So,
yeah.
um,
But you are correct.
yeah,
More than half the population of the world now resides in Asia.
yeah,
Whether you like it or not, they are going to combust hydrocarbons to
that's
improve their
right,
quality of life, whether no matter what we say. And the hydrocarbon of choice is obviously natural
yeah,
gas. That's why the West Coast Canadian
right,
LNG projects are very valuable, because delivery time across the ocean from northern BC to the Asian markets is about 9 days faster than your Gulf Coast over in Texas going through Panama. So
right.
there's tremendous advantages to the Canadian
Yep.
LNG play.
Yep, lot of profits down the road and a lot of business down the road beyond what's already there. So, hey, Des, I appreciate the update on both Enterprise and how you see things up there, folks. Here again on the screen is how you get a hold of Enterprise Group. Go to their website, click the links that I have along with this video. You know, our members, when we were loading up at the bottom of Enterprise's share price, you know, we had pretty much a 10 bagger here. Took a little bit of money off the table, and I'm telling people now that it's time to start, you know, piling back into a heavier than normal position in Enterprise Group if they haven't already, because I think that going forward, you know, you're gonna get back some of the gains that have been surrendered in the recent past, and then some. You got a lot of runway ahead of you. So congratulations as always to you and Len for the job you've done shepherding this company, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon.
You bet. Thanks, Chris. Great chat again today.
Yeah.
For much more of the National Investor's cutting-edge content and actionable investment opportunities, make sure to subscribe to Chris's free content at nationalinvestor.com. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel too. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.